Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 3 of Build and Grow Money Matters. My name is Madan from Your Story, and on behalf of all of us at Your Story, welcome to this series dedicated to helping businesses go beyond financial management to achieve financial growth, resilience, and innovation. As businesses continue to revive and pivot to newer models in these difficult times, Your Story is proud to partner with HSBC for another season of inspiring conversations, insights, and observations. We feature some of the newest trendsetters in business and stalwarts of the ecosystem to help businesses power their next phase of growth and business continuity. Today, joining us with us, we have Akshay Chaturvedi, founder and CEO of one of India's fastest growing startup, Leverage EDO. He's also part of Forbes 30 Under 30. Welcome aboard, Akshay.
Thank you so much, Madan. It's an absolute honor to be here.
Thanks, Akshay. Let's get started with your backstory now. We've built up quite an impressive record over here. You have 2,000 experts, you have connections to 200 dream universities across 30 countries. Tell us about your journey from 2017 till now, Akshay.
Oh, thanks, Madan. Thanks for asking that question. I'll just keep it very brief to begin with. Our mission was very simple. Our mission was, can we really help people from this country move to the next level of their life? And my belief is that you can do that by two ways. You can do that either by people moving from one place to another, long form migration, which essentially opens a new world of opportunities for them. And B, you can do that by getting access to better higher education. So that's what happened in my life very early on. My parents moved from tier 2, tier 3, Uttar Pradesh to Delhi to raise me. And I just realized that while growing up, I had access to so much plethora of opportunity just because I was living in a different city, right? And that mission has kind of remained very true. That's what we largely do even today. And the idea is that can we really do what people are good at? Because what happens in India, very unfortunately, is that people follow a herd mentality of sorts. If somebody is doing an MBA, everybody will do that bhed chal, right? Everybody will do an MBA, or everybody will do that degree in data science. And what we are telling people in this post 3 idiots word is that you do what you're really good at. And coupled with doing what you're really good at, you then need to be in a geography which respects that profession, which essentially gives you the maximum buck or the maximum economic opportunities against that profession. So if you are, for example, building a career in automotive, you need to be in Germany. If you're building a career in sports, you need to be in the UK or Australia. If you're building a career in manufacturing, pharma, there's very hot growing sectors in India. Then you need to be in India. If it's wine, it's Scotland. If it's fashion, it's France, and so on and so forth, right? If it's space engineering, it's California. And if it's culinary arts, it's Western Europe. So I think it's very important that people view this word as a borderless word where they are not bound by where they were born or where they started at, but they really think of this word as a very big oyster where they can go in and achieve as much as they can. So the only limits on their potential is how big they can dream. And in its essence, that's exactly what we're solving for. We're helping people dream big, dream with eyes wide open, and then we try and build as much access as possible to make sure that those dreams come to reality, whether that's by way of our platform to help people get to the best college, whether that's by way of helping people get access to universities via UniConnect or a virtual fair platform, whether that's by way of Leverage Live, which where we give in IELTS classes using the best teachers in Delhi, Bombay, democratizing that access to people in small tier 3, tier 4 areas like Gurdaspur, Moga, Kapurthala, Ernakulam, and so on and so forth. So that's largely what we're doing. And we believe in the longer run, we will be able to move millions of people from one place to another and really be able to level up their lives, because we very strongly believe that when a kids or when a student's family, when a student's life levels up, it's their entire family which levels up. So that's the best way of largely making impact and helping people grow up their life and take care of their families.
That's a very impressive journey there, Akshay. Can you tell us a bit more about the ecosystem you've built, some of the ancillary services available for students? We believe, for example, you have IV 100, UniValley, UniConnect, and Leverage Live. Tell us a bit more about these components of your ecosystem, Akshay.
Sure. So thanks, Madan. We largely, our core is that of a student recruitment company. We are helping students go to the best possible colleges in the world, which are best suited to their skill set, which are best suited to where they are supposed to be excelling at. And everything else that you spoke about largely fits into that. So we have UniConnect, which is a virtual fair platform, which is just like the Zoom call, right? We give 1:1 access to students to talk to multiple universities from across the world. And we have about 200 partners, like you rightly pointed out at the beginning. So imagine a booth where you know that, hey, if I want to pursue nutrition, I have these 5 colleges that I can go to. And I enter one of those booths, I speak to the college, I speak to the academics there. And if I really like what is happening, I can just click on a simple apply now button and be able to apply to this college. So we've kind of removed the middleman in between for both the students and the universities, and they're also able to, universities want themselves to get better and better every single year. And the only way they can do it is if they get the right students for every program. And by way of our algorithms, by way of what we do with UniConnect and a bunch of other properties, we call this a Uni Valley operating system. Everything that we do for them within that, we are helping them meet and recruit the right fit students for every program as well. And that in essence is the core of the business. And outside that, we have a bunch of things that kind of support this mission. Like I spoke about the LIFE program, which is helping people take those international standardized tests before they get into the program. We have a bunch of things built out for students after they finish the program, which we call value-added services to help them with education loans, accommodations, forex, visa. We have a bunch of things built out for the universities. But largely all of those are feeding into this core mission of ensuring that people are able to get to the college of their choice. And by doing that, they're able to kind of be in a career that is best suited for them. And just to kind of conclude that answer, Madan, I would like to add that the goal here is very clearly that Leverage Edu is not in the business of helping people collect degrees. And that's why we focus so much on the employment lens. So for example, when somebody is coming in from Andheri, for example, in Bombay, right? We will tell this person that, you know what, there were 3 people from Andheri who went to this college in the UK. And after they went to this college, say University of Essex, they got into these 3 different kinds of jobs. One was in robotics, one was with the government of UK, one was with an accounting firm. So when you make an investment of 20,000 pounds or 18,000 pounds, 18, 20 lakh rupees and 5 lakh rupees in your living cost, this is the kind of life that you can see for yourself, this 25,000 pound job. And using this, there are these typical immigration laws, the PSW right now, which is coming in the UK, which is going to also help you get work there, which is going to help you pay off your education loan in a very clear, concise manner. And then you have an opportunity of kind of moving to a points-based system on their immigration charts and be able to even get your family there. So we're trying to, in some sense, plant the entire what I call the family leveling up algorithm to the student in some sense, and telling them that hey, this is your golden ticket to be able to get a better life, and that is why you should pick it. You should not pick it just because you want to go to a college and have fun. You should pick it because you want to go to a course which you're really good at. You will get a job where you will kind of excel, and this will give you an opportunity to ensure that your family also is in a much better place than where they are right now. And I think at a very core level, if we really want our country to grow, if we really want to solve unemployment, if we really want to believe that India will become a superpower, we need more Indians to step outside in a borderless world and really conquer as many economies as we can. And I think that's truly the best way to look at where the large part of our next decade is going. Thinking of a borderless world, thinking of a world where people are really able to do what they're good at in places where they will get the maximum buck for their investment.
That's quite a compelling vision and mission you've built up over there, Akshay. Tell us a bit about how this is funded. Recently, we believe you closed a Series A round of funding worth rupees 47 crores, led by Tomorrow Capital, and overall, over 3 rounds, you've raised about 60 crores. So tell us about the fund allocation plans and what some of your ways ahead are. Akshay?
Sure. Thanks, Varun. I'll keep it brief. We have raised over 75 crores in capital. We haven't announced the last 2. We had somebody join in to our existing round. And we have Tomorrow Capital, Bloom Ventures, DSG Consumer Partners, and one more a fund alongside a bunch of really interesting angels like Vishal Gondal, Ashley Lani from Sama Capital, Amrish Rao from Pine Labs, bunch of professors from top schools in the US, and a lot of other folks as well. And largely with this money, we are focusing on making our systems more strong. We have invested a lot in pedagogy over the last couple of months. We are investing a lot in making sure that we can get to that audience in non-metro parts of India that we had not been able to reach till now. And a result of that is, just to kind of give you an example, over 70% of our business last month came from non-metro cities. And we're getting people to join us from Ernakulam. I spent a week there just before lockdown happened in the early parts of April. And Vijayawada, Surat, Indore, Patna, Mogha, Kapurthala. One of our largest places was in the month of February, Kent Hill. I hadn't heard of this place when I was growing up. I was like, okay, where is Kent Hill? It's in Haryana. And when we went there, we were essentially welcomed by garlands and whatnot, right? Because you realize that the importance of the right career advice is so much more as you step out into these parts of India which haven't received as much attention as the metro cities have. So that's a larger focus. How do we reach to the real Bharat, as we call it? How do we ensure that we build technology? How do we build processes? How do we build digitized systems that can really scale? Just to give you another statistic, there in January we helped about 67 students. In April we helped 641 students. In May we are likely to cross a number of about 1300 to 1400. So we've grown about close to almost 20x plus in the last 5 to 6 months by way of number of students that we're serving every single month. And that has largely happened because we've been able to reach the Bharat that really needs our service much more than other parts of this country where we were before this. So that's a larger, I would say, those are the big pools where our capital is kind of going right now, as well as we are spending a lot of time on building value additive capabilities, right? So we have built out an AI course finder through which is a free tool through which anybody can log on to our platform, go to the homepage, and be able to understand what course or college is right for them. And we're building many other features like this. We've built something called Leverage TV, which gives free career advice. We do a show every evening, just like your show here. And we try and tell people, okay, this is the right career for you. This is how you can figure out what your dream should look like. This is how you envision a life for yourself, and more things like that. So those are places that we are kind of pushing a lot of our current effort, and hopefully we'll be able to reach a lot more people over the next 6 months. A lot more people will know about Leverage too, and by way of that, we'll get an opportunity to be able to serve people who really need us much more.
That's a very impressive growth story there, Akshay. Even in the face of this COVID pandemic, it's been a big challenge for everybody. But even in the face of this COVID pandemic, you've been able to accelerate your revenues almost 4 times. Can you tell us how technology solutions, any other kinds of innovation you have used to pivot your operations and grow even in these tough times, Akshay?
A very interesting question, Madan. I think if I have to, there are too many. If I have to speak one which really changed things for us, it was sometime early part of last year. I and my colleague, our chief operating officer, we were in the UK. We were touring universities and we were banging their doors and telling them, hey, come and work with us. And our big message to them was that, hey, you know what, we are this player, we are this digital player, we are this technology player, which really solves for the student. Our DNA, our technology stack, everything that we've done up till here is built around keeping the student at the center of things, making sure the student can really win. And we had few takers. We were able to sign some 20-25 universities over a period of 6 months and 3 trips, and largely in the UK and Canada. And around that time, February 2020, I very clearly remember, I could see in the UK Daily Mail that COVID had just begun to hit the UK. And there was some inkling of, can it really hit India? Will it really make it difficult for these guys to come and recruit students in India? So traditionally, how these folks used to recruit students in India, Madan, was that if you've seen these big education fairs, right? In big 5-star hotels and convention centers where they come in, a traditional peer of ours would host it. You will have 500 universities come in, they will speak to students, mega 5-day fair, everybody comes in, gets their mark sheets, walks up with offer letters, very happy, blah, blah, blah. We realized that this cannot happen this year for sure. So how do we essentially make sure that we can tap this emotion? So we launched something overnight called UniConnect, which I spoke about briefly before, which was a virtual fair platform to ensure that the same thing, the same offline fair can happen digitally. we give universities booths which will essentially drive attention, but drives attention to to the kind of kids that they really want to make sure that these are the kind of kids that apply to my programs as well. We made sure that students sitting at the comfort of their sofas and beds can really interact with universities from across the world that they really wanted to get to. And that changed a lot of things for us. That ensured that from about 25-30 partners sometime in the beginning of last year, within the next 4 to 5 months, we're able to move to about 150 plus partners. And that in itself led to, while we did not plan to raise a Series A around that time last year, we had planned to raise money sometime in February this year. But that just led to a massive tailwinds coming into our sector in the West as well. And that led to some competitive term sheets, and we were able to kind of close a nice Series A with partners that we love, with partners who are kind of adding a lot of value to our journey right now in terms of Tomorrow Capital. And yeah, so now, of course, with that money in our pocket, we're able to do a lot of new things on the technology side. I spoke about the AI course finder. I spoke about a lot of things that we're doing on the back end. We are making sure that we see this as processized play. And I'm really inspired by companies like Spinny or Urban Company, which have really been able to put an offline process into a digitized flywheel effect of sorts, and been able to kind of really scale with that. So those are aspirational companies for us as we look to build systems internally which can really help us scale much more faster in a much more efficient way. And that's also where a lot of effort is going right now in terms of technology, in terms of ensuring that our internal systems really help support our growth. So you can of course imagine, when I said 67 students and 1250 students, a lot of things will break as part of that scaling so quickly and so rapidly. So thanks to investing in technology, we've been able to hold that fort and ensure that we can keep scaling further from here as well.
Thanks, Akshay. In addition to technology, you just mentioned emotions a while ago. One big emotion in this pandemic era is anxiety, worry. A lot of parents and students are worried about going abroad. But actually, what trend do you see? What are some emotions? What are some trends you're seeing in whether more people want to go and study abroad now than ever before? Akshay?
Very interesting question, Madan. So let me take a step back, right? Let me zoom out a little bit. In this post-pandemic era, and I will say post-pandemic because largely we've been able to beat the pandemic in large parts of the world, and we are closer to doing that in India too. The whole world has been divided into two zones in the higher education scenario, at least: green zones and red zones. And green zones are those where these leaders of these countries have demonstrated great capability in managing the crisis, like the UK, like the US now in the second half post Trump, like Germany, like New Zealand and Jacinda Ardern, and a lot of other leaders like this. And students are very smart, right? Students now want to be in these countries where they believe that they have great leaders at the helm. They have seen that these leaders have come in and sent a lot of positive communication about international students, about how they need international students to turbocharge their economy. So even if you look at what's happening in the last couple of weeks, UK put India on a red zone list, but within the next 48 hours, they were able to clarify that, hey, this list excludes international students. Similar things for the US, where they have put us in a list where international students are welcome. Similar things with Canada, where we've signed the largest migration mobility partnership. So you are essentially entering a phase where a lot of Western economies also want to reboot their economies, and for that they need more immigrants to come in. In fact, so the next 8 to 10 years are great times for people to kind of head out. So I would compare this to the late 1990s or the early 2000s, when a lot of Indians were moving to the UK, US, Canada, and large parts of the world. And only this time, I believe that the migration will be more permanent in nature, because now we don't see countries as lands very separate and far from each other. The world has become much more closer thanks to the internet. You and I could be sitting anywhere in the world and still having this conversation and feeling the same warmth as you would in a perhaps in a room. And I think that's the beauty of technology. So given those things in parlance, giving the new immigration reforms which have come through, which really make it easy for Indian students to go in and work there for a couple of years once they finish their degree, given a lot of recalibration on the point-based system that is coming in, if you look at the immigration charts of most of these developed countries. So I think all of those make for great trends for why the Indian student needs to, Indian student can essentially or wants to head out of country today and kind of think about a better life for themselves. So I believe this is a good time for students to head out. And the international community has largely made it very, very clear that they would welcome our students for in-person programs starting this September, October.
So there's clearly a lot of opportunity out there, Akshay. Thanks. That's very encouraging to know. Let's talk a little bit about competition now. Who are some of the other players in this space? Do you think each of you is addressing different kinds of segments, different
Correct.
kinds of value propositions, or do you have something very different in terms of your artificial intelligence technology as an edge, Akshay?
I think we largely have traditional peers who've been doing this in a more traditional way. We have players like IDP, which is a company that I really admire, which is $5 billion valued, $5 Aussie billion valued company. Sorry, market cap company because they're public, based out of Australia, which is the largest in India today. We have companies like SIUK, which is helping people move to the UK in huge numbers. And I think largely the big difference is not AI. AI is, of course, there's a tool that we use where we are helping people understand what course or college is right for them, like I pointed out before. We're using a lot of other technologies as well, which really makes our technology stack really much more efficient in nature as well. But to kind of really point it out to one thing, I think where we really stand out and a big reason for our success as of today is because we are just student first. We really care so much about the student than anybody else, and like that is something that I really take a lot of pride in. I gave you the employment lens scenario, right? There's nobody else in the market who thinks about higher education from an employment lens. We make sure that every single student is winning on the platform by way of they punching much above their weight. If somebody's saying that, hey, you know what, I think I can only go to college which is ranked at number 15, they said, hey, why can't you go to a college which is ranked 3? If somebody's saying that, hey, I can only go to a college which is ranked 200 and for culinary arts because that's an easiest course to get to, we can tell them, hey, you know what, data science is a good option for you as well because you're really good at math. So just helping people understand what is right for them, and from a culture perspective as well, Madan. So would love to host you at our offices in better times, of course. But what you will see very starkly is that we follow the big basket example of having a chair for the student in our boardroom when every single decision is being made, and just the overall DNA when any student is speaking when about us, or when any of my fellow teammates is speaking about what Leverage does, it essentially says that, hey, we're not just from a value system perspective very student first, but all our technology, all our processes, all our systems are also built in such a way that a student has to be put at the center of everything that we do. We are okay to make 10 rupees less. We're okay to we're okay to take a year more to become a unicorn. We're okay to kind of lose some short-term benefits. But what we really want to ensure is that we are the most student-loved company in this country, and that is why we essentially began as a consumer brand per se. That is why we are going out and doing business in these smaller cities right now, where we're getting a lot of love as well. And if I really want that much love from the student community, I need to be thinking about the benefit. I need to be thinking about how they're winning every single waking second or in sleep. And I think that's what me and my colleagues have very successfully done, which I take a lot of pride in over the last 4 years.
That's a very impressive story there, Akshay. In addition to culture, which you just mentioned, the other big issue in this space is policy. Can you tell us a bit about how you work closely with Niti Aayog on policy discussions? We also believe that you were selected to the Prime Minister's Champions of Change in 2017. Congratulations. I'm sure that's one of many honors you have. But tell us a little bit about the policy and how you work with governments in terms of education policy. Akshay?
Sure. No, thanks for that. The Prime Minister's Champions of Change was a long time back, and spent a few weeks working with the larger team, with Minister Javadekar back in the day, when they were in the early days of defining the national education policy, which got released some time back. But largely outside that, a large part of our work correlates to ensuring that different governments across the world are very closely working with each other, right? So, in fact, I've had mentors who are in kind of decisive policy making positions in the UK, in Canada, in Australia. And we've been very closely working with the whole embassy ecosystem in India from the very beginning. And that has just, one, helped us stay ahead of the trends and be able to tell our students that, hey, this is right and this is not right for you. Second, as a business, that's a competitive advantage of some sorts. For example, We knew very early on that UK is going to come up with the PSW, the post-study work visa, which is going to help every single student once they finish their postgraduate degree in the UK, spend up to 2 years, 3 years if they are a PhD candidate, and be able to work there. And that can essentially lead into a beautiful immigration journey for them as well. So I think just because you are able to understand policy better, just because you're able to understand things like, for example, right now we are debating whether SAT and ACT exams need to be banned or not. And I'm like vociferously against it. I really believe that standardized tests make it equal for Asians or make it equal for Indians, because a lot of people can't afford those extracurricular activities to make their profiles look much more rosy. Or we have been, for example, there's an announcement last evening from Mr. Thackeray saying that any student who's kind of headed abroad, they can get vaccines on a rolling basis. So I think ours is a sector which is very much dependent around what is happening from a policy perspective. And me and the leadership spend a lot of time on that. Me and the leadership try and make sure that any benefit that can be accrued to the student at large because of anything that can move because of our involvement in policy, we try and do that. And at the end of the day, like I said, the goal is very simple: be it policy, be it product, be it operations, be it marketing, anything that is out there, which is a component of leverage to do, it needs to be student first. And as long as we are solving for that, we are really in a very secure place, and we know that we are going to build one of the most iconic companies that this country has seen.
Thanks, Akshay. A while ago, you mentioned that certain countries are best suited for certain kinds of degrees, such as Australia for sports, engineering for Germany, etc. Also, in another recent interview with Your Story, you mentioned that there are certain careers that are not so respected or can find much opportunity in India. And it's very important for students to go to countries where these kinds of careers are respected and have opportunity. Can you please explain a little bit more on these kinds of career perception differences between India and other countries?
That's an interesting one, brother. That's an interesting one. Okay, let me give you two examples, right? Let me take my example to begin with. I was a big EPL fan when I was growing up, right? English Premier League football. And had I known that there was this college called St. Mary's University on the outskirts of London in Twickenham, which gives you a guaranteed internship in Chelsea Football Club, which puts you in positions like ESPN and the likes, and is not as expensive on my purse, right? Is almost at the same budget as the likes of most private universities in Bangalore and on the Noida stretch in Delhi, or the Navi Mumbai stretch in Bombay. So I would have largely gone ahead and done a program in sports management, right? Like, just that I did not know about it back then, just that I did not have access to that information that, hey, there is something for me which is really suited very well to my personality and what I can be really good at. And I rather spend a couple of years doing finance and then doing an MBA. But perhaps if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't have done that. I would have largely gone to a university like St. Mary's and pursued sports management. If I have to take a broader example, I'll bring in our friend Vikas Khanna again. Had Vikas Khanna been told by his BG back in the early 2000s that ek kaam kar khote tu Punjab Engineering College chale ja, right? And had he done that, we wouldn't have witnessed Vikas Khanna's greatness the way we have, right? He wouldn't have gone on pursued culinary arts or interned at some of the most fantastic places that he got access to because of that, moving out. And he also wouldn't have got a chance to contribute as much to India as he does today, right? So if you look at it from that perspective, and these are few examples, there are many more. I know of one of my previous board members who did a course in food science and in more specifically in winemaking at University of Strathclyde, and back in the mid 2000s, and then he kind of came back and joined Sula Wines as an intern. Today he's the chief operating officer of Sula Wines, trying to take them IPO. So his name is Chaitanya Rathi. And many examples like these where you really try and kind of understand that there are better highways built out for certain professions in some of these countries abroad, because their infra is better suited to these skill sets. Their infra is better suited to excelling in some of those professions. I'm not saying that you can't excel as a sports person in India. Of course you can. We have the likes of Gopi Chand, we have the likes of all our cricketers, all our hockey players. Just that it takes longer, and just that if you want to kind of be on the management side of things, if you want to do something like I'm forgetting the name of our ex-hockey captain who's running this campaign for to support all the folks who go to Olympics. He's my senior from business school as well. Viren, right? And if you want to be a Viren, if you want to be Kopichan, if you want to be some of these other people who are in the sports management side of things, you can't do that very easily in this country. But you can if you go abroad, and I believe that you should do that. You should work for a couple of years. Like I said previously, you should understand where we are lacking. You should understand what are the best practices, and then possibly use that to do as much good and help grow the systems in India as fast as you can as well. I think that's how a large part of this country has grown over the last few decades, and we can really accelerate that by doing more of it over the next 1 to 2 decades now.
Thanks, Akshay. From career comparisons, let's take a look at another kind of comparison, EdTech.
Sure.
From an education technology perspective, how does India compare to other parts of the world? Where do we stand? What does our future look like? Any thoughts on this space?
No, so I'll take a step back as well, Madan. So I'll answer the question, but let me just clarify. I don't think of leverage as just an edtech business. I think we're a combination of edtech plus immigration tech plus, I don't know, fintech, because we're doing education loans and forex now, and all of those things in between, right? I did not anticipate, or I did not have any larger motive to do an edtech business. I largely just wanted to solve a problem that I fell in love with. I really growing up, I spent a lot of time in ISEC, which was a youth organization which was helping people move from one place to another. I fell in love with that concept. I really wanted to solve for that Indian student who's going out abroad and whose access can be really widened out in terms of their opportunities, whether it's edtech or immigration tech, or whether it's travel tech, finance tech. All of those things kind of happened much later. That said, of course, because the larger word labels us as edtech, I had an opportunity to kind of travel across the world and understand edtech at a much deeper level. And in one line, I would just say that we are still a very pale shadow in comparison to how edtech ecosystems look outside the country, right? In the US or in the UK, you have edtech ecosystem is as big as the entire VC ecosystem in India, and you have like 10,000s of companies who are solving for not just the core sectors of K-12, K-12 higher education and continuous learning, but also multiple vertical and horizontal alignments that kind of come out of it. Somebody's building a simple a tool that can help higher education and somebody's building a hybrid campus which pre-K-12 folks can essentially put their kids in, and a lot of fascinating things out there in the West. So I think what's happened over the last 2 years in terms of our edtech ecosystem getting accelerated, that has been great. And I hope that it will give us a chance to be able to experience the many layers of edtech that would really help not just the ecosystem, but also our country evolve at a much faster pace. So I of course, I really believe that except healthcare, education is this one category where you bring in technology, you make the edtech ecosystem far more stronger. You bring in foreign capital, you bring in the best ideas and the best models, and that is going to just help our country also take a leap in terms of how we approach this sector. Maybe it will force some of our ministers to privatize a lot of stuff that is largely in public hands in education, which I really believe needs to be done. And I hope we will get there very soon over the next 4 to 5 years. And I would love to believe that we are in the right hands, and everything that has happened in the last 24 months is really just going to put us forward.
Thanks, Akshay. Let's switch gears now and talk a bit about the future. Where do you see yourself heading in the next few years? We believe that there are almost 1 million students from India going abroad to study every single year, and maybe this number will increase. So, what do you look to achieve in the next couple of years at Leverage EDU? Akshay?
I would love to be called a futurist, Madan. I'm not, unfortunately. But I don't want to look very far into the future. Of course, and I'll come to that as well. If you look at the immediate 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, in the next 6 months, we really want to make sure that we are one of the largest players from India who's been able to send students to the kind of geographies that we are focused on right now, primarily UK and Canada. In the next 18 to 24 months, we want to be the largest study abroad company in India. So very much focused on that. Alongside, we want to make sure that because we're solving things for the student full stack, we're able to spend more time on leverage finance, which is something that we're launching shortly. We were helping students with education loans and forex and checking accounts as soon as they land abroad. And if you ask me about how do I see it very far into the future, my thoughts can go really wild. I would imagine 5 years from now we are hopefully like I said, in a borderless world, maybe Leverage Edu has founded a country somewhere in the middle of Bulgaria where we are helping a lot of students move to new kinds of colleges which really focus on skill-based learning, which really focus on just a lot more in employment and are far more affordable in nature.
Thanks, Akshay. On a slightly different note, what is your personal relationship with money like? You talked about the professional part of dealing with money, but what about personal and maybe even philosophical attitude towards money? How do you view money? How do you want to make it grow, Akshay?
Interesting. Did not think about that question, but just on the fly, Madan, the attitude is same that I bring to my work. It's about taking bold bets. So if I look at my own portfolio, about 20% of all my savings are in crypto today. Crypto that I believe in, crypto that I believe will, with the use of Web3 ecosystem and everything else, will essentially take it to the next level. I have started angel investing in startups, small token checks in friends who are starting companies, because I really believe that is the best use of my money if I can essentially multiply the impact that my money can have and rather give back to the ecosystem which has given so much to me. And at the same time, while I've played with 30, 35%, 40% of my portfolio, keep the remaining 60% in mutual funds, gold, things like those, which can take care of my parents as they grow old, which can take care of other responsibilities that I have as a growing adult. And that is how I largely think about building up my portfolio. On a more philosophical level, I think money is a tool that you kind of you essentially want that tool to be able to do the kind of things that you want in life. So I think after I remember this, one of my mentors said this to me when I was very young, that you need 1.25 lakh rupees in your life to be able to eat the best dal, the best atta, the best chawal, and all of those things. So anything above 1.25 to 1.5 lakhs, you're essentially playing with your mind. It's about the kind of car you want to drive. It's about the kind of house you want to live. So that takes care of your a great quality of life per se. So I think I've largely believed in that one line thesis from very early years of my life, and made sure that I and I think I speak for the large part of our leadership as well at Leverage. I think we don't attach ourselves as much to monetary outcomes, but we really attach ourselves to missionary outcomes. And when you really focus on the mission, you really want to kind of use that money or use any money that you're making to just do more of those good things. You really want to utilize that as an additional resource in addition to your time. Your time is your biggest currency, and after that essentially comes money. So you want to use every currency that you have to be able to live out the missions, to be able to live out the core beliefs that you have in life, to be able to live out the value system that has kind of made you and that you believe in. And yeah, that's how I think about it today. Of course, I believe that it should evolve over time, but largely stay very true to its mission always.
Those are some very interesting tips and personal stories there, Akshay. Thanks so much for sharing them. My last
Thank
question to you is what's been your experience working with lenders, banks, investors? What are some of your expectations from lenders and banks, for example, Akshay?
I think I think they, if I have to let me group them separately. Let me talk about banks and all of the other financial institutions as a separate group and investors as a separate group. So I think um, if banks and these other institutions are very proactive in nature and they're really thinking about the business in its whole sense rather than just thinking about the services, I think that really adds a value. We have seen some of our partners, be it be it banks or be it some lenders, be it some of the people that we're working with who are helping us launch leverage finance, be it some forex providers, be it some of these education loan providers that we're working with today to help students get education loans. So I think whenever somebody tries to walk that one step extra and start thinking about the business, start thinking about what the business's mission is. So I have seen that whenever a banking partner, whenever a lending partner has thought about leverage really cares about the student, leverage really cares about being student first. Can I really focus on that and come back to them with more solutions? Can I really focus on that and come back with more ideas? Can I make their money grow in a better way using that mission as a central driving force? Because that is what will run with the leadership very, very quickly. I think that always works.
Thanks, Akshay. This has been a fantastic session. I think three key sets of takeaways I have from this session are the three E's: empathy, ecosystem, and energy. You need to have empathy with your stakeholders, in this case, students, families, parents, and so on. You need to understand the ecosystem thoroughly: students, parents, universities, foreign exchange, governments, policy, and so on. And last but not least, energy. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And you need to have a lot of passion, drive, persistence, grit to go ahead and become a regional, national, and a global player. Thanks for these fantastic messages, Akshay. On behalf of all of us at Your Story and HSBC, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madan. It was an absolute privilege. Thank you so much for hosting me.